I had like 7 hours of sleep. I'm trying to sneak another two in. Anyways, so I was asked this question the other day on Facebook. No, a friend of mine, I give Marvin a shout out. He was saying, man, your last video was freaking epic, man. And he asked me to do a video on entitlement. So I said, why not just go ahead and, cover it? Sometimes I wish I was back in like probably like the mid 2000s and not really living in today's society. It's not that I don't enjoy life, because I do. I enjoy life just like anybody else does. I feel like the enjoyment is not the same like it used to be. You know, you used to like going out a lot. You used to like hanging out with friends. You used to like, hey, what's up, Daniel? I used to like um, going trick or treating when I was a kid. I used to like um, going on these dating apps and meeting people. I used to like meeting new people. I used to enjoy those things. A part of it's maybe it's because I'm getting older, and maybe it's just kind of just a thing in the past. But ever since about 2020, 2021, it just seems like to me like the whole society has just completely gone downhill, just completely just changed. And what like drives that wrench, you know, it seemed like meeting people back then was a little bit more genuine, in that you knew your neighbors, all the neighbors knew each other, you knew your friends, and it was a lot easier to trust people. Like you can trust your neighbors and stuff like that, and people kind of looked out for each other, if that kind of makes sense. Now, I'm not saying that to a degree that doesn't still exist, but it's not the way it used to be. It's more in small pockets. People were more came together on issues. I'm not saying necessarily you didn't have your disagreements here nor there, but now it's just everybody's fighting and nobody really gets along. And if they do get along, it doesn't really last that long. People put their personal interest in front of the group. When I was growing up, it was always about the group. Do what's best for the group, do what's best for your family, do what's best for the group of the organization you were part of, or do what's best for um in other words, it one man don't stop no show. You ever heard that old term? Do what's best for the group, do what's best for the family. Now it's just like everyone just is doing what's best for just strictly themselves, which that's fine. It's at the end of the day, you're trying to position yourself to where you're going to be the most successful, and I get that. But it just seemed like there was more unity back then. There was better communication. People communicated better with each other. um, People were able to have their differences of opinions and it still be respected, and we could still be friends at the end of the day. um, People were more simple back then. It was more easy to have conversations and converse with each other and have ideas put together. Anyways, um, now, so it's not really the case. You can't really converse or convey ideas or thoughts or any sort of sounds good. Anyways, lay down. Anyways, times were a lot more simpler back then. And to a degree, I wish it was like that still today. I know it's probably a thing of the past now. It'll probably never be the case anymore. Quite frankly, it sucks. You know, the thing that sucks the most about not being able to have an opinion or to be able to convey an idea anymore is that there's always somebody out there that's trying to get rid of you for just a thought. When, you know, in my personal opinion back then, that was just the norm. People just naturally just had these conversations, and now it's just a thing in the past. Now, like, if you look at, like, when I first, and I don't mean to bring politics, but there's a point that I'm making to this. When I first voted for Donald Trump in 2016, right? And let me make my point to what I'm making of this before you say what you're going to say to me. Rather you agree or disagree with that comment. Um, when I first voted for Donald Trump, it was, you had the right and left, you had Democrat, Republican, and people like kind of stuck together. You know, you had your different groups and all that, but people like formed together under like the umbrella of the unity of like the organization or the representation you were representing the party, right? Now, if you fast forward to like 2020, that was probably still sort of the thing. Now you fast forward to 2024, that's not really the thing anymore. You got people within their own groups fighting each other now. There's fighting internally, and nobody really seems um, to get along. If that sort of makes sense. Anyways, even the Democrats, same thing. Like they all fight amongst each other. It's the same thing. Even family. Like they always used to raise you on family values and say, well, you're always going to have some family members that you're going to like. There's going to be some that you're not going to like. That's always been a thing. It's never been the case. But at the end of the day, you say, you know what? I'm not gonna insult my family in public or put their name out there in public. But now that's sort of the thing now. You know, that's sort of the thing now. There's no such thing as a group anymore of like people that represent something. Now it's just people are just kind of like out for themselves, even within the group, even trying to branch off or whatever. Eventually, it's a lot of like individualism. Like in this country, there's no such thing as family unity. There's no such thing as like marriage or anything like that. It's all a thing in the past. There's no such thing as like being with just one person. It's more so of just being with a collective group of people and sort of just doing your thing and swinging yourself around society. And it's sort of like this barbaric behavior. It's almost like the uh, uh, what's the word I want to use for it? It's like the caveman times. It's like now we're back to like you know like when humans were first you know weren't even considered humans. We went through like 7 or 8 stages or something like that. I don't know all the names, but it seems like we've kind of divert back to that first stage again. You know, um, I watch a lot of these content makers and I watch their videos, and now there's some good ones. Don't get me wrong, but man, I tell you, there's a lot of entitled people, man, like a lot, like, and that's basically the point of this video here is that the reason why this country's in the big mess that it's in is everybody seems to be looking for answers. The best assumption I could give up is we live in an entitled society, and that's why we're in the mess we're in. And that's the reality of it. And that's the best way I could sum it up. That's why the society is the way it is right now. We live in an entitled society, and people um, have gotten to the point, and I don't want to say all, but I want to say a vast majority of people have gotten to the point to where they think that they don't have to do anything and they should just be given free stuff. Now, this isn't a debate. I'm not like referring to welfare necessarily. What I'm more referring to is just the entitlement of life that people should just do things for them for nothing and they don't have to do anything for it. Or that you should just do it for them just because. even if they didn't earn it or didn't, you know, I'll give you an example. Like, I don't have a problem helping people, like, every now and then, like, giving money and stuff. If you need a little cash, you're low on groceries or something, like, I don't want to see somebody starve. I totally understand that. But when you see people, when I've had people ask for money, a lot of the times, most of these people, they never do it themselves. They'll never loan any money out to anyone else, but they expect you to loan them money. They expect you to give them money, but they never do it. You see what I'm saying? They never do it themselves. I'm always the given person, and I'm not expecting you to do it for me. But what bothers me the most is usually most time when people ask for help, if you if you know the person real well, you can evaluate of whether they do it or not. And usually 9 times out of 10, they're very selfish individuals and they never do it themselves. But yet they're always asking for help. But they never ever do it. They never ever help anyone else. But they always want somebody to help them. And that is entitlement. It's the truth. People it's the same thing in like the dating market. And so you could throw that in there because everybody likes to go on dates and meet people and try to find your significant other. That's normal. That's been going around since the beginning of time. But now they got these apps and these dating sites you can go on and meet people. The dating apps used to be real cool back in the day. Like, you could 9 times out of 10 you get to meet someone and get to know someone and go on a date. And if you didn't like each other, cool. And if you did, then you go on another date. It was just fun. Nowadays, it's just it's a lot of it's everything but what the site is supposed to be. It's like, you know, come follow me on this site right here where you could pay for pictures. Man, I'm not doing all that. I mean, thank God I don't get on these apps no more, but that's what it's turned into. For the guys, guys are just looking for a fast way to, you know, a one night stand, and then the girls are just looking for buddy or whatever. It just seems like there's no genuine sense anymore of people just wanting to meet. It's more so of like selfish needs. Maybe she just wants a free food or something, or maybe she just wants you to sub to her channel. I don't know. And then for the guys, it's like, well, I'm just looking just to for a one night stand. I'm not really looking for anything, and it's a bunch of selfishness. It's a bunch of selfish needs. I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with money. I'm not saying there's not nothing wrong with having a good time. There's nothing wrong with that, but it seems like that's all just people want now. They just want just something fast, easy, go, move on. No one really takes the time to get to know each other anymore. Like, really, spiritually, mentally. It's just, I don't know if that's the human mind now, where people are just so, what do they call it? Like, um, you just, like, people get bored fast. So they just want to just, get through with it. And then they try to find interest somewhere else. Maybe that's just a new thing, you know? If I was to sum it up, about being entitled, like, even to a degree, there are times in the past that even I was entitled. And I never really thought about that because, I always thought that I was entitled to this or I was entitled to that. It's a mental disease. Well, it's not a mental illness, but it's a bad way of thinking. I've had my phases. That's what life does to you. And I, at times, thought that I was entitled to shit that I thought I was entitled to because I thought I was entitled to it. If things didn't go my way, I would get pissed, frustrated, angry. But that's normal because no one wants to lose. At the end of the day, like, no one wants to lose, right? You want to be known as the victor, the winner. You want to be known as the person that achieved this. Now it's okay. But like, if you kind of look at your life, success is very small if you think about it, because you're going to fail at most things in your life. And then when you finally do find that success, you're going to cherish it. Why? Because you failed so much to had to get to that point to find that success, to where, you know, you cherish it more, because it took a long time to build to that point. For where our society's at now, it's all about me, 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 and not about us. And if we can find a way to get back to us, then everyone will be covered. I'm not, now you're going to say, oh, well, that sounds socialistic, socialism. Like, no, they didn't say anything about that. Never said that. Don't put words in my mouth. All I'm saying is that we need to get to a point to where it's about the group, about us. We need to get back to family values. We need to get back to, you know, I'm just saying that we need to get back to these things before it rots us inside. Now let's go into the workplace. People are entitled when it comes to the workplace too. You got um, people that think they deserve all this money, and yet they didn't do anything to deserve it. You got people out there that are like, that will say, well, I'm just going to do the bare minimum. I'm not going to do any more than what I'm hired to do. And it's like, okay, that's fine. But then, like, a lot of the times they don't even do that. They don't even do like what they're supposed to be hired to do. And then they'll say, well, if you paid me more, I would do more. And I'm like, well, that's funny, because you said that when you got hired, you were going to do this job. And then when you got hired, you're not even doing the job that's technically under your job title. I'm not talking about the extra work. I'm talking about your job title. You're not even doing that. And then they get angry when you tell them that. I'm like, okay. And then, a lot of people complain about, oh, I didn't get a raise and stuff. And it's like, and then they do get raises, and then they just still complain. Like, they'll still complain about how they're not making enough. And I'm like, okay, I agree with you on that. Like, the taxes are what's killing this country. Like, I explain this to people all the time. If we just eliminate these taxes, you know, we would be in a better situation. But instead of complaining about taxes, everyone just wants a raise. And I'm like, well, you wouldn't ask for the raise as much if we get rid of these damn taxes that are taken out of our checks. We wouldn't have a problem. You wouldn't necessarily have to go to the drawing board necessarily to ask for a raise every month, because we'd bring value back to the dollar. But people don't want to hear that, because they think, oh, well, the number increases. That means my life is better. Not necessarily always the case. Just because you go from $12 an hour to 24 doesn't mean your life's going to improve. Now, it may improve in certain areas, but you're going to have extra money, but it doesn't necessarily mean a better life. A lot of people get misconstrued on the numbers, the numbers. And that could be very misleading. That's why I said, money is just a transfer of energy at the end of the day. Money comes and goes. It has really no value to it. You think about it, like money itself. Now, yeah, of course, if you're a billionaire or something, it's going to have a little, value, and you can do more. But ultimately, money is just a transfer of power. It's just a transfer of energy, really. That's all it is. It's not really anything. It's not really worth anything. So, in my opinion, instead of asking for raises, let's make it to where things are more affordable by decreasing our taxes here. And that way, we don't always necessarily have to think that the answer to a solution is a raise. If that makes sense. I'm just saying that, you know, and then you got people that are given high positions of authority and they take advantage of the system with loopholes and legislation and stuff. Like when you look at our federal government, some positions, some politicians get kickbacks. They are basically using hedge funds to embezzle money. And that's where I have an issue with that, is when you start stealing, because it wasn't money that you earned. You're basically stealing money, stealing taxpayers' dollars, stealing money off of people who are working and paying taxes. And that's where I think, to me, the line in the sand is drawn, is when you start being a thief. You know, well, I had a buddy one time. He had me over at his house, right? A true story. And he left, I think it was a $20 bill on the table. And we were supposed to go out somewhere. I was hanging out at his house, and he left a $20 bill on the table. And I kept looking at it, kept looking at it. And so what I did was I walked over there and I saw it, and I went and I, told him, hey, you left your $20 on the table, by the way. And he said, thanks, man, I appreciate that. So we went out. And then he said, hey, man, you can have the 20. And I'm like, what? I thought that was yours. And he said, no, I just wanted to see if you were honest enough that you were going to come to my house and steal. Now I can trust you, so you can cop it. I didn't think nothing of it, but, that holds a lot of merit. It's like, you invite me in your home and there's money laying around. I'm not going to take it because it's not mine. I was raised, do not steal. But a lot of people don't necessarily have that same thought process. It's different if you find a $20 on the ground and nobody finds it, and it's like, well, finders, keepers, losers, weepers, nobody claimed it. Okay, that's one thing. But it's another thing when you're stealing from people you either know, or when you obviously know that money clearly belongs to somebody else, and you're just making it blatantly obvious that you're taking it. That's where I think the line in the sand is drawn for me. No, Lewis, you make a good point. I agree with you on that last comment. I'm just sitting here chilling. No, but we do. I think that humans have evolved into this sort of entitlement. I think a lot of people think that they just deserve, that they deserve to be pampered, deserve to be taken care of. And a lot of the reason is because we live in a country that also pushes that narrative too. We live in like the best country in the world as of right now. One of the best. And you look at other countries that people are very humbled. They're not as arrogant, if that's the word I want to use. But you look at people around here and everybody thinks they're special. Everybody thinks they're somebody. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, but everybody here, they want to give orders, they don't want to take orders. Everybody here wants to be a chief, but nobody wants to be an Indian. Everyone here wants to be the COO first day, and no one wants to take orders. No one wants to be given orders or anything, and everybody just wants to give orders. Nobody wants to, everybody wants to be the boss. And that's not just at your job, that's just in life. Like, everybody wants to be the boss. They want to be the the Michael Jordan or something of whatever in life. And it's just like, you have to have chiefs, you have to have Indians, right? The old saying. And then you have to have employers, employees. And it's the same thing like in work. Everybody wants to be the boss. Nobody wants to be the employee. Everybody wants to be the employer or the COO. Nobody wants to take orders. And it's just, if they do, you're kind of met with a clap back, Nobody wants to be the, nobody wants to really be humbled. And another thing, when it comes to like helping others, whether it's on the job or friends or whatever, like I said, I don't mind doing it. And people will come to me and ask me, "Hey, I don't know how to do this. I don't know. You help me?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, you got a minute? Yeah, I got a minute. That's cool. I don't mind helping you." Because I just think it's just a nice thing to do, even if like you weren't expecting anything. The problem is with a lot of people now is they want to do something nice when it's rewarding them. In other words, not the feeling that you feel like you made someone's day. It's just they want something in return for doing something nice. And so that's when you have to question, well, are you really doing it because, it's genuine in your personality, or you're just doing it because you just expect something in return? And unfortunately, we got to a point to where people just feel, oh, well, I should just do this because, well, I'm just going to, it's just, I'm getting something in return. Like when you donate stuff, now I know a lot of people question, well, should I donate to Red Cross? Should I donate to all these, to the Salvation Army or whatever? That's always been a question, right? But now it's like, I remember when I was at Walmart and they would say, hey, they would have these little like donation things where you could donate $1, feed the hunger, feed a family of three. Every dollar gives you 3 meals or something. You've heard that saying before. Walmart used to be notorious for this, and then they started saying, well, if you donate $1, you get nachos and a drink. Now it's $2.50 because of course everything's gone up. But you donate like $3 and you get like either a hot dog or nachos and a bag of chips and a cold soft drink, right? And I never really thought about it, but everybody wants the nachos or the hot dog, right? Chili cheese dog. So you make your donation. Some people say, well, shit, I'll donate 10 and I'll get 3 hot dogs or I'll get 3 nachos. I'll get 3 nachos. And so you think, okay, shit, at least I get to eat something. But then I really thought about it. I'm like, why should I be getting food for something that normally should be out of the kindness of your heart is to donate, right? Like if you don't want your clothes, you donate it, right? Or if you don't want, or if you want to donate towards the poor or the homeless or whatever, the children or whatever, you would donate. Why should I be given something in return for something that should be genuine out of my heart? And now it's just like we're sort of teaching people that don't do something nice unless you're being rewarded and or if something was given to you in return in exchange for your kindness. So I noticed that a lot of people they say they're kind and stuff, and that's fine. But when they do something, they want something in return for their service. Now, granted, I understand if it's at a job occupation, that's totally different. But I mean just genuine to be thoughtful. You know, like I told you, the hot dog stand, right? You donate $3 and then in return you get nachos. It's like, what are we teaching people? That the only reason why you wanted to give the $3 to feed these people was so that you could get your nachos and your soft drink and a bag of chips? I mean, what are we teaching people? Is that, well, if you do something kind, you're going to be rewarded with a pizza party. You ever heard that old saying? It's sort of when companies say, hey, let's do a pizza party because we've reached our numbers. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Everybody likes pizza. So they would order pizza or Walmart, at the time they were ordering the Chick-fil-A boxes. You go in there and grab a Chick-fil-A boxes and nobody really gave a blind eye to it. You would eat it and then be done and then, whatever, right? You'd be done with it. And then thinking about it, going back, yeah, you reached your numbers. So why are you giving me a pizza party for it? I feel like what you're doing is you're basically shoving it in my face that you made a ton of money, which that's okay. Whatever. We reached our sales. Hey, everybody, this is to reward people. It's like, I don't really give a shit about the pizza parties. I could just go order my own box of pizza at Caesars, Little Caesars, for like $6. I don't really need your gratitude. I'm not like trying to be mean. I'm not a child. I don't need you to buy me pizza. I sometimes I kind of feel like some companies do that to rub it in your face that they made a ton of money and that your reward is pizza. It's just like, I'd better off you just not even telling me. I'd be better off for you just not telling me your numbers are up. Unless you work at like some sort of car salesman place where you have to sell cars and shit. And you have to have your numbers up when you work in sales. That's one thing. But when it's just like for a regular company, it's like, I don't really need a pizza party to justify you making a lot of money. Now I kind of feel like it's personal. Like, you're kind of rubbing in our face, to be honest with you. No, I'm not expecting a raise, but at the same time, that doesn't give you the excuse to rub it in my face either. Just saying. Food for thought. Now, if the sales really went up like you said they did, then give me $1 raise ain't that bad of an idea. Most likely won't happen. Just do away with the pizza parties at work. We don't need your pizza party. Sick of that shit. Now, I'd rather you just give me Rockets tickets or something, or tickets to a concert or something. Maybe then I'll be a little more grateful. Like, okay, now I can go to a concert and you gave me 2 concert tickets. I don't want your pizza. I don't want your pizza. I don't want your soda. I don't want none of that because it doesn't mean anything. Pizza parties at work are a joke. Our sales have gone up. We made $10 million and we're going to reward you with a pizza party. I'm like, I don't want your freaking pizza. I will buy my own. I don't care about that crap. What is this, high school? It's like, nah, man. Now you can give me a $2 raise. How's that sound? No, we can't do that. I'm like, but you could buy the pizza, though. You could sit there and rub it in my face with a pizza party. Right? Rub those numbers in my face. That's the difference. I just better you not buy the damn pizza and not tell me about your damn numbers. Unless you work as a car salesman or you work in sales and it's required to keep your sales up. But most of these jobs aren't necessarily sales per se. You just work for the company. They manufacture, produce goods, sell it, bam. Distribute it, bam. That's it. We don't need no pizza party. Pizza parties are lame. Anyways. So, and get back to it in reference to the entitlement video. Like, I really wish it was the early 2000s or like the late 2000s. I really does. And if I could take a time machine back to 1980 something, I wish I could do that. I would have loved to have been a teenager back then. Oh my God. I would have loved it if I could have been a teenager back in the 80s or the 70s. Oh my God. The disco era. I would have loved it. Now, of course, the technology's gotten better now, and it's easier life, and it's easier to transfer information. But do you really feel free? Do you really feel free, despite the fact that you have all these technological advances? You really feel free? No, not necessarily. You don't really feel free. You have what's called an illusion of freedom. If you think of like freedom of speech, freedom of the press, all this stuff. It's like you have the freedom, but you'll suffer later, the consequences later. That's sort of how you think about it. That's sort of what it is. Do you think people got too greedy? Marvin said. I think greed is natural in people. I think it's natural for us to be greedy. I think that, it, in a sense, if you want to be successful in life, you have to be competitive, and that you're going to be competing against people that are going to try to tear you down in every way, shape they can, because everybody's trying to get to the top. Everyone, if you think about it, in some way, shape, or fashion, is trying to ground themselves to get to the top, or position themselves like poker position to get to the top. And so you're constantly fighting against other people that are trying to tear you down. Now, most people say, well, it's just people from the bottom trying to tear you down. I'm like, well, that's not necessarily accurate. Yes, for most cases, but not entirely accurate, because people at the top are trying to remain at the top. They don't want you getting to the top. And then you got people on the same level, and they got to pass you to get to the next spot. So it's a constant game of a tug of war. Life's like a big giant tug of war. It's like everybody is on two different sides, and you're trying to pull the rope, and everyone's trying to position themselves to get to um, that place in life. Whether it's through honest work, owning your business or whatever, or rather it's stealing through legislation and kickbacks and hedge funds and insider trading and stuff. We've talked about the criminal aspect of things. Everyone's trying to get to the top, whether you're doing it the right way or whether you're doing it the wrong way. The problem is there's people are not really humbled, and I don't know what it's going to take to get to that, but a lot of people are very more so now than I would say probably in the last 20 years. I would say probably more selfish, self-centered, arrogant to a degree. You see a lot of this, even not just at the top, but even at the bottom level too. It's a mind psyche. A lot of people are like this. I run into them all the time. I just don't say anything because it's not my place to tell you how to act. But it doesn't mean I'm not aware of the situation. I just don't say anything. I just stay silent on these issues. Because a lot of times I'm not trying to fight with anyone anymore or argue with you. I'd rather just remain in silence and just, judge you based on what I see, your behavior, and how I see it, and go from there. And then determine if I want to hang around with you or not. And if I don't hang out with you, it's not because I hate you. Maybe I'm busy. Maybe I'm getting into things. And then maybe there is a reason. Depends on the person. I agree with the last comment there, by the way. Taxes has been getting more and more. Taxes has been taking away our freedom, yeah. But of course, everybody's mad at EBT. Like I said in the last video, everybody's mad at that, but they're not angry at the people stealing our money at the top. About corporate welfare, I talked about, where they're stealing billions of dollars, but no one bats an eye. No one conversates about the super powerful stealing. And I know it's because it's hard to have that conversation because they're the ones in power and there's nothing we can do about it, but it doesn't mean we can't talk about it. Doesn't mean we can't acknowledge it or admit it. But of course it's easy to pick on poor people because of course it's easier to shame them and go to their house and knock on their door and say, well, you're getting $400 worth of food stamps, but I think you can get an effing job. It's like, well, why don't you say nothing about these banks that are stealing money? Why don't you say nothing about these corporations that are begging the government for handouts? Rather, it's on the right or the left. You don't say nothing about the politicians getting kickbacks. You don't say nothing about the frivolous spending of where our money's going to, taxes wise. Nobody bats an eye. Or if they do, it's short-lived conversation. But EBT, oh my God, that's the talk of the day, talk of the town. When I can tell you that EBT fraud numbers are nowhere near as comparison to the money that's being stolen from the corporate level. But nobody talks about it. Oh, it's not a big deal. It's just Trump being Trump again. It's just Biden being Biden again. Obama being Obama again. Nobody talks about that. You know, it's just in one ear, out the other. Oh no, you can't talk about them. You can't talk about our politicians stealing money. Or you can't talk about these corporations asking for bailouts every 5 seconds. Seems like, and then they get those bailouts. Banking system, same thing. I mean, it's not a big deal, right? But it's easy to pick on the poor. It's easy to go up to a homeless guy and tell him to get an effing job, which in most cases now, jobs don't even hire anymore. Most of these jobs, they're not hiring. In fact, AI is wiping a lot of jobs out. So if anything, they're not really, job numbers, I notice, aren't even really a thing of the conversation anymore. I noticed that back in the previous elections, the last 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever, they would always talk about job numbers every month, and they would report job numbers. Do you notice this last and current administration, they don't really talk about job numbers anymore? Because why bring it up? Because you're going to say, oh, AI just wiped out 70,000 jobs. AI wiped out 80,000 jobs this month. That's going to, why you think Trump's going to bring that up? Hell no. He don't want nothing to do with that. Because he knows it's going to be a blemish on him, because they're going to be like, well, why would you allow this to happen? And then, again, he's not responsible for AI, but at the same time, it's going to blow smoke up. It's going to be like a hot topic button if he even mentions it. So he's just staying quiet on the subject. Now, when it comes to this AI shit, and this also goes in entitlement, now, of course, everyone hates AI, but they like to use it for everything, right? But we hate AI. We have a love-hate relationship for the technology, right? The AI technology. Um, I like AI, but I hate how we have to use it for everything. That's sort of my issue with it, is that we use it basically for everything now. Um, my thoughts to it is that, AI's, it makes it easier to do XYZ, but at the same time, it's gonna wipe out jobs. So it's a double-bladed sword. It's a double-bladed sword, right? It's a double-bladed sword topic. But although there's some good qualities, there's some bad qualities. But the problem, well, I think that we as humans, to a degree, have it's a double-bladed sword, right? We push for AI technology. If you're a business owner, you can cut down a number of employees, and that means more profits, right? So it's all about profit, profit, profit. But at the same time, AI technology was also pushed because, and this is going to be the harsh truth, and nobody wants to hear this, and I know this sounds a little bit of a sore eye topic, but a lot of people have pushed for this AI because of entitled people. And what do I mean by that? People that call in a lot when they shouldn't be calling in all the time. You got people um, that aren't dependable, aren't motivated for the jobs. You have people that don't want to do their job when given the position, rather it's an unemployed level and or supervisor position and or even the owner at cases. People have gotten a little bit lazy, and I'm not going to lie to you, there's times where I've even kind of gotten a little lazy at times. I'm not going to leave myself out of the conversation, but people as an entitled have become entitled and extremely lazy. And so with AI technology, it says, hey, we don't have to worry about hiring anyone anymore because, hey, look, you call in a lot. Cool, great. AI's here now. So we've sort of, in the same sense, kind of a little bit kind of deserve it because of our entitlement, because of how we've become so arrogant as a country, as a society, and how we just think that we're entitled to everything and we've become a little lazy and selfish. And I think in a way, this is sort of our payback. I hate to say it because it's I don't want to diss anyone, and at times I'm lazy at times. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm not gonna lie to you. There's times maybe as we as humans that we kind of deserve it in a sense, even though um, it's a double bladed sword topic on the AI, but maybe we kind of deserve it because we've become lazy and entitled and arrogant. Like if you go into like a lot of jobs nowadays to like go shop or whatever, a lot of people that are getting hired, they don't even know the basics to their job. And nor do they seem motivated. And the first response I get is, well, if you pay me more, then I'll do more. And I'm like, really? Is that so? So if you got a $10 raise tomorrow, would you know where this was on this aisle? Probably not. Just because you get a raise doesn't mean it's going to necessarily motivate you to do your job or to learn the product. You still may have to take time to study the product, to learn the product, so that you could give an adequate answer. I just feel like that's a cop out for people wanting to be lazy or remain lazy. And so, um, when like for example, like when I first got a job at Kroger's, right? I was a youngin back in the day, right? When I got my first job, I was 14. I was 15 years old, right? And they hired me at Kroger's. I was a bagger, and even though I wasn't the smartest at my job, but I knew where everything was. So say where the can of soup is, aisle seven. Where's the meat? Oh, it's in the back in the meat department. You're gonna go down to the very far corner to your left. I mean, I just knew it because it was repetition. Everybody just knew their position. You go to places like Walmart, for example. When I got hired, I noticed that people that I was working with, they didn't want to help any customers at all. They just wanted to just work there, rack up money, give an easy position, but they didn't want to really do anything for most people. They didn't want to be bothered. They didn't want customers bothering them. And then the old saying was, oh, I'll just go to the back and see if it's back there. And yet that means they'll never come back out of the back. So they're back there and they never come back to help the customer. It's very entitled and very selfish. And there's times I've even gotten in arguments with some of them, and I've literally almost goddamn went off on some of them. But I had to hold it in because I'm like, these are my coworkers. I need to be respectful. I need to be professional or whatever. And it's like I had to hold it in because I'm like, you just literally leaving these customers here. You're not even helping them, bro. Like that. What's wrong with you? And they'll get angry when you tell them that. Like, how dare you tell me I have to do my job? How dare you? And it's like, okay, so now they don't even go to the back anymore. They just don't even know the answers to anything. And the item could be right in front of them. I'm like, dude, where's this at? Oh, and it'll be literally right in front of them. I'm like, how do you not know where this at? I'm like, bro. And it's sort of like, that's very frustrating. There's times where I've walked into certain places, and I don't mean to sound like an arrogant bastard myself, but there's times I had to almost explain to them how to do their job, and I was a customer. And I'm not trying to be mean. It's just like, I have a lot of retail experience, but it's like, and I don't mind like helping or showing others, even if I'm not in a position or getting paid to do so. But at the same time, it's like, a lot of people don't have the motivation to even learn their own basic product knowledge or have the motivation to learn while they're on the job. They just don't, they're just not motivated. That's like your average worker today. And it's a little frustrating. It's a little frustrating because I'm not saying I'm walking around, oh my God, I'm a genius. Oh my God, you're saying you're a genius? No, I'm not a genius, but it's like I take initiative and motivation to want to learn to the best of my ability. And do I know everything? No. There's still things I need to learn, but I'm willing to learn, and I'm willing to try to learn. I'm willing to show it because I don't want you to just think that I'm not dependable. And is people lack motivation. Now, is it the fact they're not getting paid a lot? Is it the fact that they're not being taken care of? I mean, maybe that's sort of the argument, but even in certain jobs, I've seen people get raises and their attitudes never really change. So is it really the raise, or is it really just you just not giving a shit? You have to ask that question because, like, for example, if let's say you were selling cars, but you didn't know shit about cars, okay, fine, and then you're like, well, I would learn about cars if you give me a fucking raise, okay, fine. So you get the raise. Okay, so you got $8 more an hour. Now start learning about cars. And then they want to give you an attitude about it. And then it's like, but you just said that if you got the raise, you learn about that's how you call people's bluff about the whole raise debate. About, well, I would do more if you give me an effing raise. Okay, well, you got a raise. Now learn it. Oh, well, they'll give you attitude about it. People are entitled. People want they want the job title, but they want the job title. They don't want none of the responsibilities, and they don't want to do the actual job. They just want the job title. They just want the money that basically comes behind it. They don't actually want to do their job. Now, yes, there are some people that are, will do their job. I'm not saying they're not, but it's not the majority like it used to be. It's just certain individuals you can depend on to say, okay, this guy here or this woman here, I know I can depend on. These others, no, not really necessarily. And it's an entitlement. People, they just want the money, but they don't actually want the responsibility to that the money comes with. For most people, they don't want the responsibility, and the excuse is, well, I want a raise. Okay, fine. Give them a raise and call their bluff, and then you'll see it's not most of the time. It's not that. It's just they have an attitude problem, and that's the reality of it, man. There's times I've had people go off on me, right? Because they're having a bad day. And so back in the day, I used to be short tempered, so I used to go off back. But now as you get older, you start being more professional. It comes with the territory of age. But you start to be a little more professional in your craft and how you communicate with people. So I'll let them go off and I'm like, okay, are you finished? Okay, yeah. Well, the reason why I asked you this question is because blah, XYZ. Oh, okay. Well, I'm sorry you're having a bad day. So I try to give them the benefit of the doubt. But sometimes I'm like, you have an attitude. There's some people that just have a rotten attitude. And you're gonna run into those people in life. Whether it's family, friends, coworkers, loved ones, etc. And sometimes you just like, you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and talk to you and give you some wisdom, but I'm just gonna put it in God's hands. Let him deal with you because at this point I'm just exhausted all options. You can only talk to somebody for so long and try to give them words of wisdom. But if they always have a bad attitude, they have to, sad thing about it is you have to let people fall on their own. The more you try to help people, the more entitled they become. And I've learned that. I'm starting to learn that. You go out of your way to help people financially, spiritually, whatever. After a while, they don't really care to better themselves. They just want you to be that lifeline for them so that they can continue. And it's like, after a while, you have to question yourself. I don't mind helping you every now and then, but if I don't see you motivating yourself, if this isn't motivating you, then maybe I need to stop. Because I'm not going to sit there and help somebody that refuses to help themselves. You get sick of it after a while, man. I've ran into people like that. I had a buddy of mine. He just, he was living on his dad's inheritance. And I told him 3 years ago, when you run out of that money, you're going to need to get a job. Oh, well, I'm not thinking about it right now. Yeah, that's because you got $100,000 from your old man passing away. But once you run out of it, you're going to need money, dude. You need some sort of residual income. Now, all of a sudden, it's an issue once the money runs out. It's always last minute. And I explained that to him, told him the situation. I said, look, I'll buy you some groceries, but I even bought him some work boots and work pants and a shirt so that he can go to this job interview. And he just, in that one time, I was evaluating him, his behavior. What did he show? Lack of motivation, and he had a little bit of an attitude. Slow, lethargic, just reading his body language. Finally, out of frustration, I said, where is your sense of urgency? Like, you're slow, lethargic. I said, dude, you don't show any motivation. I'm going out of my way to help you, and you're not showing any motivation to want to better yourself. So then I said to myself, okay, that's the last time you're eating out of my wallet. The very last time. You can only be nice to people for so long. You can only do nice things for people for so long. Eventually, that eventually that's done. You can only do nice things for so long. The best way is to let people fall on their own and let them figure it out. I know it sounds harsh, but that's the reality because that's how I had to learn. Is to fall on my own ass so that I could, you know, there's nothing's more than a sense of urgency than when you only have yourself to depend on. And that's what a lot of people don't understand is that with this entitlement, people think that somebody has to do this for them, somebody owes them something, and that's not necessarily the case. At the end of the day, you only have yourself to depend on because if you depend on others, eventually they're going to let you down. Because at the end of the day, they're just going to think about themselves. Which maybe that's a good entitlement in that case. You know, to put yourself in a good position to where you don't have to depend on anyone. Then I have to depend on others. There's nothing wrong with trying to find love. There's nothing wrong with trying to find someone or, there's nothing wrong with being in a team, like marriage, or if you do have friends, I'll cut for you, you cut for me. I'll pay for you this time we go out to eat. You pay for me next time. And really, you don't even have to bring that up. It's really just, I'll pay for this tab and then, maybe a couple tabs and every now and then maybe you'll get a tab here or there. It's just like to show gratification. I don't mind doing that. I really don't. It comes with limitations. You know, I'll leave it like this. I do not mind helping people that want to help themselves. What I don't want to do is help people that have no motivation and have bad attitude and want to do nothing to improve themselves. Those are the only people I have an issue with because it's entitlement. They're now they think they're entitled to your money. They think they're entitled to your time. They think they're entitled to you doing things for them, and that's not how it works. That's not how it works. Self-dependency or self-efficiency really is the best way. And that way you don't have to depend on anyone else. You have yourself and you have your own, your own little nest egg. You don't have to worry about nobody else. You got your own shit. You're good. So if you want to go out and watch a movie, guess what? You can go out and take yourself out to go watch a movie. You want to go out and get a bite to eat? Boom, there you go. You can go out and get a bite to eat. You can do those things. You don't have to worry about nobody else. Nobody else helping you or aiding and assisting you. I like people who are motivated, in life, just in general. It doesn't always have to be about money, but just people that are just excited about life, just excited energy wise, just love to get up. And I'm not saying you have to be perfect every day and sit here and be like Mr. What's that? Mr. Who's the guy that's a beautiful day in the neighborhood? You have to be like that. Mr. Rogers. There you go. Sorry. You don't have to be like Mr. Rogers, waking up being like, it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. You don't have to do like that. But just, I like people who are just, they're full of positive energy. You don't necessarily have to be rich and or poor necessarily, but just people who are just motivated. They're just motivated for life. And it's just nothing. I like that. I like people that show a sense of urgency and that people that want to better themselves, whether it's, physically, spiritually, financially, whatever the case may be. You don't have to be the richest person to hang out with me. I'm just saying that I just like people that show motivation. It inspires me. When you're around somebody that's always negative, and trust me, there's people that are successful and they're still always negative too. So there always is that aspect too. There's always people, that have a ton of money, but they're always miserable. You run into them, they're never happy, never, nothing ever satisfies them. So in that case, even with success, they still are never happy. And there's some people you could just never please in life. Never please. They're just never happy. And I've rated the people who were had a lot of money and they were just miserable. Appreciate the good workers. I've always arrived at work early and don't miss days. I make an effort to do my job and improve. Employers don't appreciate us. Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up for the person who commented there. Don't know your name, but give you a shout out. Yeah, you are right about that. The problem is that when you go into most places of work, right? Um, Really, if you took a pie, which is 100%, right? You learn this in school, right? You got a pie. Of that pie, maybe a slice of it is good and the rest of it's kind of stale. You look at the workforce the same way. About 20% of your workforce of that business puts in at least 80% or better at their job, and they're dependable, reliable. They want to learn. And then you just take the 80% and they just float. We all float like in the movie Stephen King's It. We all float. When you're down here, Georgie, you float too. You know? And it doesn't have to be just employees. It's also employers. It's also owners. I've worked for some companies with owners who were never there and didn't and their business was just terrible. It was a rundown shit show. It was a joke. And he didn't care. You know, I've worked for some cool employers. I've worked for some that were completely sucked, and I wondered how the hell did you get that position? You must have knew somebody, because good Jesus, Lord of mercy. You know, I've met some employees that were great and that should have been a manager and just never had the opportunity. Or maybe they didn't want to become a manager. Maybe they didn't want to be a supervisor. And then I met some people that were employees that just never gave two shits about nothing. Were lazy and entitled and just didn't care. I met people like that. You know, I knew a guy, he was one of the nicest guys I ever worked with. He was lazy as shit, didn't want to do nothing. And I worked with him at Walmart, real friendly guy. And I noticed that he got away with so much. He was late every day. He left early. He would, like, instead of calling in sick, he would just go, like, he would come in. If he wasn't feeling well, he would tell the manager, I'm not really feeling well. And they would let him go home. And I'm thinking to myself, how do you get away with that? Because I know that if that was me, I would have gotten written up. Like, how did you get away with that? Well, come to find out, he was begging one of the managers. And I was like, oh, that's how you're getting away with it. I guess that's what you call insider trading. And I was like, no wonder why you're getting away with so much, because you're banging the manager. It's like, Jesus Christ. You know? No wonder why you're getting away with it. No wonder why you're not fired. Yes, you're good in certain areas, you're not good in others. Saying. No, Marvin's actually one of the best workers I've ever worked with. He's a lifelong friend. He was a former military guy. Always works hard. It's always the hard workers that never get noticed. You know, I think the way that the problem is with companies nowadays is, man, this is just my opinion about most jobs. They don't have a career path. And you get these jobs and they're just dead end. There's no career path. A lot of these places don't want to advance you. They don't want to give you any raises and incentives. And they just want you to just do your job, and they want to just treat you like a Hebrew slave. And it's like, they don't really care if you know the product, learn the product, and it starts from the top down. I think a lot of these COOs are from corporate, like Wall Street guys, for numbers like analytics and they get hired for these positions. They've never worked at these companies, and they're just there to soak up as much profit, and they give it to shareholders. And so a lot of the times at the corporate level, it's different than at the regional, the district manager, and the regular employees. It's a big difference. And like at the corporate level, I just feel like they're just there to just strictly increase profit by all means and not really care about customer care and not really care about employees' needs and employer needs. They just completely distance themselves the corporate level has disconnected themselves so bad that they don't even answer their phone anymore for complaints. They don't even render customer complaints. I've seen customer complaints on certain websites for these specific managers or employees all the time. They're still there. Years go by. And it's like back then they used to render that shit. They used to say, hey, they would tell the district managers or go investigate that. They don't even do that no more. It's all about profits and shareholders. They no longer care about customers. They stop giving a shit about customers. In their mind, analytics say if the customers are still going there, then why care? And the only way people learn their lesson is when they start losing money out of their pocket. And unfortunately, until that happens, why should they care to render anything? That's employee needs, employer needs, customer needs. Why should they care? That's how a lot of corporations act now. And then they wonder why no one's motivated. They wonder why a small minuscule of employees are motivated. It starts from the top and it trickles all the way. He's the last one to work and the first one to leave. I hate people like that. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, you're absolutely right. To that commenter, homegrown cowboys 8450. Appreciate that. Yeah, you're right. Um, the problem in corporations is that, or jobs nowadays, is hard work used to pay off. Right? Like in the 50s and 60s, you would work and then you would have a house, a white house and a picket fence. You'd have 1 or 2.5 kids, a dog, a retirement, a house that was paid off, taxes are low, cost of living's lower. Sure, you didn't make as much, but you had rewards, you had retirement. Now you don't have that. You don't have a career path anymore. Most of these jobs are dead end. Most wages are stagnant. Most of them have no career path to wanting to learn or excel. Most of them have no programs to motivate you to want to improve. Now, I get it. I get it. And a lot of corporations have distanced themselves from customers and distanced themselves from employee and employer needs. Whether it's work equipment, whether it's getting the right gear, whether it's getting the right intel in, whether it's better communications to customers. Now it's all about profit shares and shareholders. That's all they care about now. And it's unfortunate. That's the entitlement. That's the society that we've gotten to. That's unfortunately the place in society right now where corporations stop caring about customers. You look at the 80s and the 90s and the 70s, the 60s, the 50s, and corporations cared about their customers. They cared about their employees. They cared about their employer needs. You don't see that really anymore. They don't care anymore. And it's unfortunate because we live in an entitled society. It's about profit sharing it's about profits on steroids. And so if corporations don't care about employees or employers to a degree, I'm not making excuses for their behavior, but I can understand it. I can understand, why they feel the way they feel. And sometimes what sucks is, as an employer, you feel that no matter how much you try to motivate people, the policies in place and the lack of disconnect from your corporate sponsors or corporate people, it renders you powerless onto how much you can do. So you feel like you're kind of in a lose-lose battle. You feel like you're kind of losing, even though you think you're winning. You can only motivate people for so long. Yeah, I know. That's true. That is true. Now Marvin's the best worker I've ever had. I'll never say nothing bad about him. That guy will run circles around me, and he's like 42. And that guy will run circles around me. He's an amazing worker. One of the hardest I've ever met in my life. The guy just, when I mean he goes to work, he literally goes to work. The guy gives 110%, 120%. I just told him if you worked on your people skills a little bit, you'd be like a great manager. The problem is he's a hermit. He doesn't really talk much except for the couple people at the job, which that's fine. But you'll never get a management position being like that because part of being a supervisor requires what? Communication. You have to be able to communicate with people. And if you can't do that, it's going to be very hard to get that. It's going to be very hard to move up. I was explaining to him in a nice way. That's what he needs to do. You got to be able to communicate. Gotta be able to communicate with people. You have to. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to make it. Yep. Oh, yeah, I was reading Marvin's comment right now. Hey, Marvin, appreciate you talking shit about me, Rose. No, I wasn't talking shit about you, Marvin. I actually took up for you. I stood up for you, bro. I stood up for you. All right? On my Facebook Live, too. I stood up for you, bro. I'll say I didn't. I love working with you, man. You're one of the best guys I've ever worked with in my life. I've had many jobs. You're probably the hardest working motherfucker I ever met. There was another guy named Anthony too that I used to work with when I used to work at we used to throw flyers in the neighborhoods. Man, that kid was amazing. And he worked hard. He had 3 different jobs. He had 3 jobs. Do you think the internet's made people lazy? Um, what's the word I want to use? Yeah, private them. Um, I think, and this is my personal opinion, I think we're becoming more inherently lazy as a society. I think that we depend so much on the internet for everything, and we depend on um, we're now going to depend on AI for everything, right? And so I think people have become more lazy, and I think as a result, people have become more entitled because of that, because of the fact that you now have everything at your lap of a push of a button now. So you become more arrogant. Like it's like ordering Uber. It's like, why hasn't my pizza gotten here? I just ordered it 5 minutes ago. So you're calling and you're ranting, you're raving. Why is my pizza not here? You know, people are in a position now where they want to have service given to them like a king or a queen, but they don't want to give any service to anybody. People are spoiled. People are entitled. Man, we live in a entitled society. I mean, just look at it. Just look around. You can tell people are entitled. Like when I first got a job, right? Like I was always told you got to be respectful to people, be respectful to customers, be respectful to your employer's employees. I still live by that motto, right? But nowadays you walk into most businesses, the employees are in a bad mood, managers are in a bad mood. They'll go off on the customers. It used to never be that way. It used to be like if the customer went off on you, then that's when you get a little upset, and even then you can't say nothing, be professional. But now it's like you'll get that venom from the employee and or supervisors, and you're a customer. So I feel like the role is reverse. Now the customers have to go into the store and sort of walk on eggshells, hoping they don't make the employees and employer mad. That's what it feels like walking into a lot of these places now. Rather it's a grocery store, rather it's the mall. It's just people just feel like, people are all, and I get it. They're angry because they feel like they're going nowhere in life. And I know that feeling's like. Trust me, I know. But you know, as a customer, you just feel like, well, I feel like I have to go up there and train some of them, even though I'm not getting paid to do it or I don't work there. And I shouldn't have to do that. I shouldn't have to do that. But I think if you were to look back at the whole thing, I can kind of understand to a degree why it's this way, because of the fact that corporations don't even communicate anymore. At the corporate level, they don't even communicate anymore with the higher ups of the chain of command. There's no communication, and it's just all about profits, profit sharing at all costs. Doesn't matter anymore. Analytics say if all these customers complain, they'll still come here and shop. So, is it really their responsibility to come out and motivate people? I'm not necessarily saying that's the case, but at the same time, because you disconnected yourself so much and it's all about strictly profits and nothing about team morale or team unity and stuff, people are going to feel like they're at a dead end place with upper echelons that could give a shit less about their existence. And imagine, that's like if you're in a family and you have a brother or sister and your brother or sister got everything, you never got nothing. Eventually you're going to feel inadequate, like anything. So I get it. Like I said, I've worked for companies before where a manager or an owner was never there and he ran the place like a shit show. I've worked for companies like that. I've worked for some where they just hire the worst employees ever. I've seen it. I've been there, seen it. The retail sector is definitely the best place to see these kind of practices, because it's like basically a low end job, entry level jobs. So you kind of get a taste of what the real world's like. But then even when you go on the upper echelons of your income bracket, you still don't really see much of a difference at the higher end either. You just, you know, to me personally, it's people will try to drag you down regardless of what you're making. Like, you could come in with the best attitude ever and people just hate it. It's just like that. I noticed that that's kind of weird. It's like, always come to work, try to motivate others or be in a good mood. And then there's just people there that just they're just miserable and they just want to bring you down as much as they can. And it's just like, dude, like, it's uncalled for. Well, first of all, the tipping culture. Um, the tipping culture is gotten a little out of hand in regards to the entitlement that they think they should be given X amount of money for either lack of service, basic service, good service, or no service. They think they should be given, you know, 100% gratuity for whatever service they feel like they want to give you. And it's gotten to the point to where they'll even make comments and saying, well, you should have left this, you should have left that. And I'm like, excuse me? You don't tell me what I should leave you. And if that is an issue, you need to talk to your employer. I don't mind, I leave good tips, but, and I leave at least, I try to leave a minimum of 15%. But if the service is really good, I'll probably make it like 25%. Just depends on the day I'm in. I've left 50% on tips. It just depends on if what money I have, you know. Marvin said the problem with tipping good is sometimes they expect it all the time. Yeah, and then and they don't have to give you good service. Yeah, there's that too. It's a double-bladed sword. It is a double-bladed sword. Like sometimes you think you're helping somebody out, and then in the long run you're making it worse. Yeah, absolutely. That is so true. You think you're helping people, but then you're really just making it worse. Even though technically you're helping them. Like have you ever done something nice for somebody and then they appreciated it, and then when you went and did the same thing for them the second time, they really didn't have a reaction? Like they kind of had like this vague look on their face, like when you went and helped them out a second time. You know what that is? That's entitlement. Because now they've gotten used to you doing nice things for them. So now they what? Expect it all the time. And that's another thing that you got to be very careful of when you start helping people out. That's another niche is they start expecting it every time, and then they don't appreciate it anymore because now they just expect you to do it. It becomes an entitlement. That's why sometimes I can sort of understand why people don't want to help others to a degree because it's just they don't appreciate it unless you just do it every now and then. It's just like, look, I'll do this nice thing for you once. I can't do this all the time because I have my own, you know, issues or whatever to take care of. I can't just keep doing this. Okay. People get entitled. You know, we live in an entitled society because we live in a society that, you know, pampers us. You know, we live in one of the best countries in the world. Like if you look at some of these other like third world countries, you know, sure they're not advanced as much as, you know, the United States in certain areas, but then again, the people there are very humbled. You know, over here everybody thinks they're like Michael Jordan, LeBron James. You know, they think they're like the best of the best, and it's like a lot of people think they're special, but they're really not. You know, it's an ego. You know, a lot of people think that they're the shit. It's just simply not true. A lot of people think that the world revolves around them. Not true. A lot of people, they don't want to do anything for anyone, but they expect you to stop what you're doing to do for them. That is not how it works. You know, some people are very selfish, but they want you to do everything for them. So, in a sense, I can sort of understand to a degree why people are individualisms because it's just like I only have myself to depend on. I can't depend on others. And I know if I help all these people, they're going to expect it and they're not going to want to do anything. So let me just get my own nest egg built first. So I can understand why, to a degree, even though I don't agree with it, or it sucks that it came to this point, is why we went from a group setting to an individual setting. You know, when I was in college, I remember they used to give us these assignments and we would have like 4 or 5 people work on it. And everyone would divide the work up and say, okay, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do this. It always would start off that way, but it really would only end up with like one person really just doing all the work. And then everybody else would sign their name on it. Finally, I got sick of it because I was always the guy that took the project home and worked on it. And they would just do nothing, you know, and they would just want their name on the paper to get credit. I got sick of that. So one day I went up to the teacher. I know I'm a Stitch, right? Teacher's pet. I went up to the teacher and I told her, I said, I did all this by myself and none of them did anything. I took it home. I worked on the project, put hours into it, and they did nothing. And she just said, okay, well, put their name on it, but I'm not going to give them any credit. I'm like, all right, bet. So When the grades came out, they all got zeros. I got 90 something. And they're all like, came up to me and I was like, well, you didn't do anything. Why do you think you deserve it? Why do you think you deserve that grade? You did nothing. And they got mad at me. And I'm like, well, if you'd put your part in, I wouldn't have a problem with that. But the problem is people don't want to put their parts in, but they want that 100. They want that 100 grade for the group project. But yet, you didn't do anything. You were just lazy and entitled and thought that I was supposed to do everything and put in the hard work myself while you sit there and do nothing. You know how frustrating that is? That's very frustrating that people are like this. And that's just the reality of where our society is in now. Um, how people are. Sometimes you go above and out your way to prove yourself for a company, an employer, or a person, and it doesn't matter because at the end of the day, most people just drift in society. Most people do nothing or they do bare minimum to nothing. So you feel like it's a lose-lose battle. You question yourself. Why am I putting all this hard work in if it means nothing? And that's why you just give up, eventually. Or you don't really just give up. You do what you got to do to make your day go by, and that's it. You know, I can see why people lose their motivation. People lose their motivation because of the fact that these things happen, and most people follow. Most people don't. You know, everyone thinks they're a leader until it requires to be one. Everyone wants the responsibility. Everybody wants to be a manager. They want to get paid like one, but they don't want to do the job. Same thing on the employee level, the same thing on corporate level. It's a societal problem. We're an entitled society. I mean, that's just it's the best way to sum it up. Like, for example, I'll give you another example. I get it. Nobody wants to work an entry level job. It's low wages, not guaranteed hours. Get it. Nobody wants to do that shit. That's really the death of the summer job was probably about 10 years ago, where people really stopped working in the summers while they were in school. Now, some do it, but it's not very much like it was back in the day. Now, people don't really want to work unless they're getting like $50 an hour. The problem is most of them don't deserve it. They don't deserve it because they're not either trained or haven't learned set skill position, but they just want the $50. And then some people are trained for that position and they want the money, but when it comes to doing their job, they don't want to do it either. I noticed. Like, in other words, they're like, okay, I got the position now, I'm good. I can just lay back and do nothing. It's like, no, you still have to do it. You still have to do your job. You still have to work. It's like, what made you think it was going to stop there? That's why, like, when a lot of people get management positions, if you notice, they just stop working. Like, they literally just stop doing their job. And it's not all managers, but I've seen some managers like this, and I'm like, you still have to work. Like, you still have to do your job, dude. Like, I get it, you had to work to get that position, but once you got it, it doesn't stop. And you got some managers that sit in the office all day, put their feet on a chair, and don't do a damn thing. And they're sitting on the payroll. And I'm like, I've seen this at Walmart, so I know what I'm talking about. It's it gets like that. And just people are just like I said, people are entitled. People are entitled. They think they're just entitled to shit. And it's a sickness. Even in the relationship aspect, same thing. You always got somebody that's more selfish than the other person, and that typically happens. There's no I in team and there's no we either. You think working from home is a good idea or bad? Does it make people more produce or more lazy? Um, there's always been this debate about remote work. That's what you're calling it, remote work. You know, I don't know. I've never had a remote job, but I see the pros and cons to it. Now, part of the pros is you can still produce at home while making money. That's great. A lot of people sell stuff online. People are content creators. I get it. But then, like, also the bad thing too is it's like people can also be lazy and they can get away with it because they're not in a camera in a office setting, so they could be lazy and cut corners, and that could also cost the company money. So it's a double bladed sword topic. Now everybody just wants to do remote work, you know, which AI is also going to be pushing a lot of those people out eventually, especially with the jobs that are now in the market now. Like they're coming for Amazon, they're coming for all these companies. Makes you think they're not coming for remote work. The best part about working from home is saving on gas. Well, yeah, absolutely. Like I said, there's nothing wrong with working at home if you actually do your job. Nothing wrong with it. But the question is there's some people that take advantage of it. So I guess it's a double bladed sword. You know, I guess it depends on the individual. Because I don't have enough experience in remote work to know exactly how it works. If that makes sense. Rachel said the problem is people working at most jobs is even when you try to do your job on the job site, most of your higher ups and or people on your level don't want to help, and then they'll hang up the phone and not render aid. I know. Yeah, I've been at that. I've been like that too. I've had some nights where I could tell the managers don't want to be bothered, supervisors don't want to be bothered. They just want to just chill. I get it. And sometimes I may need you know assistance or something like some extra equipment or something, and they don't want to answer the phone. All right, it could be a little frustrating. You know, do you think if people's lives improved, do you think that it would make the situation better? You mean, for example, like if the taxes were cut? Absolutely. If they cut the taxes down next to nothing and impose the flat tax like I suggested in the first place, you're not going to see that under this administration. But I can guarantee you, if I was in office, I would cut property taxes and I would do a tax reform in spring of 2027 or 2028. My bad. If I was elected, and I would cut state tax, the income tax, death tax, gift tax, and just impose a one-time flat tax for everyone to pay 8%. You'd be saving what, 60, 70% in taxes? Winner, winner, chicken dinner. Raise my hand. It would improve the lives of most people. It would motivate people to have actual meaning in life. To actually say, you know what, I have my life fulfilled now. With not so many taxes being taken out of my check. I feel like I actually have a reason to like want to be better and do better because you have that extra money now. And at the end of the day, it would help. A lot of people would their lives would improve. Absolutely, Marvin. That's a very good question. I think just people feel like this economy's going nowhere, this country's going nowhere, and I think that you know we've just gotten to a point to where um AI taking over, so there's really nothing that's going to motivate people to want to do that job because they already know that their job's eventually going to be gone anyway. So what's the point of being motivated for it, right? If you already know it's going to go, it's just a matter of time when AI takes it. You're really not probably not going to be motivated to want to do it more. And even at my job, I feel like AI is going to take my job one day. Like if they create robots to do my job or AI to cut corners and hire less people, and they may say, Rose, you based on the seniority list, you got to go. I'm like, okay, I understand. It's no sense of getting angry about it. Would I look like beating myself up over it? Will I be upset? Yeah. I would have to move on, obviously. But, at the end of the day, depending on others, they're just going to let you down. That's the message that I was saying earlier. Same thing if they let me go. Like if they said, hey, AI, going to relinquish so many positions and, your name came up. Okay. No harm, no foul. Thank you for the opportunity. I mean, there's really no sense in getting upset about it. It's just, and I'll be sad. Yeah. But at the end of the day, you depend on others. They're going to let you down eventually. This is the nature of life. Have y'all ever heard of those people that were in relationships and they say, I'm not, I can never be single. I always have to be with somebody because they always want to feel loved. Like I used to have friends that were like that. They would say, I'm never single. I'm always in a relationship with someone. I'm like, because you have to be reinforced to be loved, which is understandable. But at the same time, do you love yourself? Because if you loved yourself enough, would it really matter to have to be in a relationship all the time? Think about that. Is it really required that you have to be with someone at all times when you can find your own happiness? That way you don't really have to depend on others so much. It's just like with AI. We depend on AI for everything. It's the same analogy for love. We have to depend on validation and love from other people to reinforce us when a lot of it is self-internal, self-inflicted. We can find our own happiness, our own enjoyment, our own fulfillment without necessarily having to depend on others to reinvalidate that. Now, is that great to have love from others? Yeah. I mean, people admire you, yes. For, you're with someone, absolutely. But if you solely depend on that, then that also, that double-bladed sword effect. You don't love yourself enough to have somebody else love you. Then do you really feel loved at the end of the day? Crickets chirp. That's why I think self-sufficiency at the end of the day is the best way. Not having to depend on others, because eventually they're just going to let you down. Like, hey, I'm working at this company. Oh, AI took my job. Damn, I'm out of work. Fuck. Hey, we went on a couple of dates and I haven't heard from her in 3 months. What's going on? Oh, she found somebody else. It's like, you're like all in on trying to depend on others to find that happiness, and then it just eventually it just feels like the cord's going to get cut eventually. And so I try not to like hang my head on the wall anymore as much as I used to, in regards to that. Let's say, somebody lets you borrow $20 and they're like, hey, can you let me hold $20? I'll pay you back. And then they give you the $20 and you borrow it, or they give it to you. And then you realize like 2 weeks later, you need another $20. Then you call them and they're like, yeah, okay, yeah, I'll give you $20. Okay, cool. So they let you borrow $20 twice. And then you call another month later and you're like, hey man, you got 20 bucks? And they're like, nah, I don't have it this time. I'm broke. Now party's like, well, wait a minute. You gave me 20 bucks the last two times I called you. Now all of a sudden you don't have the 20 bucks. There's that entitlement right there I talked about. But the point that I'm making to that is that he doesn't have the $20 for you, or she doesn't have the $20 for you. So you were dependent on that $20 to be given to you, when in fact, eventually they were not going to give it to you anymore. They're not entitled to give you $20 every time you talk to them. That's not how it works. You know, it's kind of somewhat sums up society, right? You know, people are like this. It's a sickness. Even when I was broke, I still never asked anybody for money because I always just had a lot of pride in myself. It's just people just expect you to do things for them, and they never do anything for anyone. Most of the time, they're selfish. Most people, they're very selfish. They just want you to do shit for them, and they don't want to give fuck all about doing anything to no one. And that's very entitled. Wouldn't you say? Wouldn't you say that that was entitlement? That is entitlement. It's very selfish. People are very self-centered, especially in Western culture. Like here in the United States. Oh my God, it's on steroids. People are not inspired to want to learn. Our leadership definitely has felt this, but also just in general, people are just not motivated to want to do anything. It's just, they're just motivated, they're motivated when it comes to like their little interest or whatever, but when it comes to working with others, communicating with others, doing your job, doing this, no one wants to do that. They want the reward without putting in any work or effort. And that is an entitlement. I had 6 hours of sleep. I went to bed tonight about 9 o'clock, woke up around about 4. Just felt some type of way, hit the record button, and just kept talking. Now I can't shut up. It's unfortunate that we're at these times. You think shutting the internet off for a month would humble people? Probably for about 2 weeks. Yeah, 2 weeks. If you shut the internet off for 2 weeks, I think people will be more humbled. But as soon as they jump back on the internet again, they'll act like juveniles. You know? It would just fix us for the time being. I just miss the old days. Life was much more simple. I don't know if those days will ever come back. Probably not. That true, your circle of friends gets smaller as you get older. I'm starting to see that. I think your trust for people goes down as you get older. I think you start trusting less and less people. You start trusting less on what they say and more on what they do. And when you're younger, it's more on what they say, less on what they do. You know, because you're impressionable and you want to impress everybody and stuff. You feel like you have something to prove. As you get older, you don't worry about that as much. You grade people based on how their actions are, not on what they do or what they say. But yes, people, They just expect you to do shit for them, and they don't want to do anything in return. And the best medicine for that is just to, you know, you have to let people fall on their own. I hate to say that, and it pains me to say that. I don't mind helping people that are motivated to want to do better. But if you're not motivated to want to do better, you have an attitude problem and you're lazy, it's going to be a little bit hard for me to want to say, you know what, I'm going to go out of my way to help you. I'm going to go out of my way to do this once for you. Because why should I help you when you don't even want to help yourself? And that's how I look at people now. It's like, you know, I made that mistake last year when I was helping my buddy with the groceries. And I realized how lazy and entitled he was. And I told him, where's your where's your sense of urgency at? He says, well, I'm depressed and I have mental illness. I said, so do I. So it didn't affect me. I told him, you know, you're going to have to be motivated. You're still going to have to work. It doesn't matter about your situation. You're still going to have to go out and work. Because I was explaining to him in a nice way, nobody is going to go out of their way to do nice things for you. I just did this as a one-time thing. But nobody is going to go out of their way to help you. Nobody. Because at the end of the day, people are going to help themselves before they help you. And some people don't even help themselves, but they're not going to help you. So if you're one of those people that's waiting around, waiting for something to help you, you know, sure, you may have your mom or dad do it. Eventually, it's going to come to an end. And why do I say that? Because one day your parents will be gone. And you won't have that support anymore. It just is, it's the nature of the beast. You know? Rachel says, do you think people don't appreciate things like they used to? No. You have to let people fall on their own. You have to let them figure it out on their own. Because if you try to help everybody, that's great. But then they become dependent on you, and then they're not going to push themselves because they always think that, well, Uncle Steve, Uncle Crispy Cruiser is here again to help me. It's like, no. The only time I feel good about helping people is when I see that they're motivated to help themselves. Like, let's say, for example, if Crispy Cruiser, you say, God forbid, something happens to him, right? Let's say he's homeless or something. He says, hey, Rose, look, I know we don't know each other that well, but man, I literally have no place to stay. You know, this and that. I'll be like, you know what, man? Crispy Cruiser, you're cool as shit. Come stay at my place. Shit, I'll fucking make an excess bed for him. May not be the best, but I'll make an excess bed for him. You know, Travis, something happened to him. I'm like, she can stay at my spot. There's some people I would cut for, and I would let them stay with me just for shits and giggles because I know they're generally good people, you know, but I have to see that you're motivated in life. And it's just, you know, people fall in hard times. It happens. It happens to the best of us. But, you know, let's say, for example, my buddy that I helped out with the groceries, you know, he calls and says, hey, you know, I have nowhere to live. I'm going to be like, there's a red flag because I already know his behavior. He's not motivated to want to do anything. Now you become what's called a liability. So you're going to be staying at my house, eating off my shit, running up my bills, and you're not going to contribute anything on your end. I'm like, is that really something I want to invest in for somebody who's not really motivated to make change? Then I'm going to say, okay, in this case, I'd have to decline you coming over, like, and living at my place because I know I know what I'm going to endure. It's not good. Some people, you just have to let them fall on their own. You have to. That's the only way. It's the only way they're going to learn. They're not going to learn any other way. They have to fall on their own ass. That's the reality of it. There's some people I know personally. I would be honored to let them stay at my house if they fall on their ass, because I know that they're generally trying, that they're motivated. And I'm like, hey, I need a place to stay for a while. Hey, shit, I'll make a room for you, brother. There's some people like that you would cut for, and then there's some people that just that it's gonna be nothing but problems. Even in families, the same shit. It's the same thing. I got one of my brothers I would cut for, the other one not really so much. You know, Still up to no good. Try to teach him the way. Doesn't want to learn. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to let you fall on your own. Not gonna help you financially. Not gonna help you. Well, why? Because you're not trying to change. I really feel like I'm just putting a band-aid on a giant wound at this point. I can't do it. I can't do it. Yeah, I can't try to help people that are not motivated to want to help themselves. It's just the reality of it, man. What's up, bro? Hey, what's going on, Donovan? I saw you in the chat room. It's unfortunate the way that we are now, but what about ungrateful kids? Rachel says you give everything to your kids, they in return hate you in the long run. That happens. I've heard stories of that. You spoil your kids too much, and they end up hating you, despite the fact you did everything for them. Oh, absolutely. That they're just ungrateful, and it's an entitlement. They just started expecting you to do it. It's like when you try to be too nice to people. I mean, it's cool and all. There's nothing wrong with being, having a genuine good personality. Like when you try to be nice to people, sometimes it's also bad, because then they stop taking you like seriously. They start thinking you're a pushover. They start thinking that you have no control or command presence over your life. Then they're like, oh, how much can I get away with? How much can I do to this person? They're not going to do nothing. You know, they're just going to, keep on and keep on doing they're going to test the limits to see how far they can get away with shit on you, until one day you just finally snap and you go off on them. And sometimes it may be too late. It may be too late. Maybe a case of too late. I hope you guys learned something in this video. And I'm not just screaming and yelling. I'm just kidding. I hope you guys learned something today. The main problem with society right now, especially in Western culture, is the fact that we think we're too good for our own, what's the saying? I think we think we're too good. We think we all think that we're the boss. And we all think that we're the shit. And we all think that we're entitled to free stuff, and that we're entitled to this, and we're entitled to that. We're entitled to somebody's kindness. We're entitled to somebody's stuff. We're entitled. We're entitled. We're entitled. We're entitled. I demand $50 an hour. I demand this. I demand. And it's like people are so selfish. It's like the pretty girl at the ballroom effect. You're used to all these guys coming up to you, so you just think you're entitled to every man's attention. It's sort of like that. It's like this. It's kind of like the same analogy. We all think we're the pretty girl in the ballroom. We all think we're entitled to a certain life, or a certain someone, or a certain this, or a certain that. There's There's a case of, entitlement. There's a case of what's reality telling you. Reality is telling you this is not possible, or it's not the case. A lot of people, they don't want to put the work in for anything. They just want you to just give it to them. And you got people that, uh, you know, they want this in a relationship, they want this, but they don't want to put in any work to get such. They just think they're entitled to that. It's like, I'm entitled to Pamela Anderson. I think Pamela Anderson should come to my house and come fuck me. Well, that's a nice entitlement, but that's just not going to happen. I'm entitled to Britney Spears. I think Britney Spears needs to give me a relationship because I'm entitled to it. You just got people like out there that are just very childish when it comes to these things. It's just the society we live in, unfortunately. There's nothing wrong with being humble. I know they demonize that on the internet, especially content makers. They all want to be arrogant and narcissistic, but I'm like, to be honest with you, I think being humble is the best, like, medicine. It's the best way, because it's just like, there's nothing wrong with striving to be the best at what you want to be. But you don't have to be a jackass to do it. You don't have to be an arrogant prick to do it either. You can have confidence, but arrogance, it's the difference. Reality is going to slap you in the face one day. When nobody wants to be around you. And even if, let's say, for example, you have a ton of money and still miserable. And there's people I met that were just miserable motherfuckers that had good money and they were just miserable. You can't tell them nothing. It's just, that's the way they are. Just goes to show you that money can't buy happiness all the time, not in all cases. But yeah, you can, be able to do the extra things a common person can't, but you have all this money and yet you're still miserable. It just speaks volumes about your character, who you are. Our Western society has a lot of soul searching to do. We got a lot of soul searching to do. A lot of inner soul searching to do. Because I feel like we're like rotten from the inside. Slowly but surely. We're just like rotten at the core. There's still hope, though. Despite the fact that we live in a entitled society, I think there's still hope. I still believe there's hope in humanity, even though I think it's a very small probability that's going to happen. But I still think there's hope. I don't know if you guys feel the same, but I feel like there's still hope. I still feel like it may be a small amount of hope, but there's a little bit of hope there. There's still a little bit of hope. What is there one thing that you learned about being older now that you did when you were younger? Rachel says, to be more patient. In other words, I've learned how to communicate with people a lot better. I've learned how to listen more instead of hearing. Like, you hear what I'm saying, but are you listening? I actually am better at listening now than I was then. Listening to people and hearing their stories and having a chance to give them an opportunity to speak. I've learned how to communicate better with people. And I'm not a master at my craft, but I think I'm a lot better now than I was then. You know, back then I just was hearing people to hear people. I think now I'm a better listener. So if I was to sum it up like that, that would be my best explanation. All right, guys. Well, it's 2 hours, and I don't want to ramble for another hour just to say I did it for three. I've literally ran out of shit to say, and I don't want to keep y'all on. Y'all can listen to it while you're at work, work out. You rewind this video. You got 2 hours to make 2 hours go by in your day. Maybe you're at work for 8 hours. You want to rewind this so that 2 hours will go by, and then you can watch my other video that was 4 hours long. And that way you can go by your whole work shift fast, just to hear what I have to say. Maybe I'll do these videos. I feel more comfortable doing a lay down video than I would being in the car. You know, I feel like I'm in therapy session where I'm just laying down and talking, talking, talking. Should give everyone a shout out, by the way. You guys watching my videos, man. I'm sure I'll do another one of these again because I killed it the last one. Last video, man, I had like, it was 4 hours long, bro. That's a long video. This one's too. It kind of gives me reminiscence of the old days where I used to just hit record and just say what I wanted to say. Back then, when I actually made videos, I actually could say whatever I wanted to and get away with it. Now that's not the case. It's a lot different in 2025 now. It's a different ball game. You don't really have the freedom of speech you think you have, and if you do, it's just short lived. Because as soon as you say it, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. Depending on what you say and how you say it. Now it's about wording. It's about how you word it. But the crazy thing is again, you see a lot of these content makers, doesn't matter what color they are. They say like a bunch of racist propaganda, and they're able to get away with it. I don't get it. They can say whatever they want. A bunch of racist shit, and guess what? You know, it's like they could say it and it's fine, but if I say something controversial, it's not even on the verge of racism. It's just like a regular video. Like it's worse for me than it is for them, even though their videos are worse than mine. It just doesn't make any sense. And it's like rules for me, but not these. Crazy how that algorithm works. You know, I can't get most of my subs to watch my shit, but yet people can post racist content all day and they get thousands of views, thousands of likes. I don't understand it. I just don't understand this shit at all. It's like, what are rules meant to be if no one follows them? It's like, you know. Well, yet my channel's shadow banned because I talk about how we need to get rid of property taxes. Well, my channel's shadow banned, right? Somebody could post racist shit all fucking day and their shit gets tons of views, tons of subscribers. I don't get it. I don't get this world. I really don't. It's like, do we want a solution to making our lives better? Or do we want to create more problems than they already are, thus making it worse, making our lives worse? Sometimes I wonder if people actually want solution, or if it's just smoke and mirrors for just wanting to create more problems. People just want to stir chaos. They just want to be chaos starters rather than be a part of the solution. They would rather be a part of the problem than be a part of the solution. Think about that. They want to be part of the problem and not part of the solution.